The cold emptiness of space stretched in every direction, black and endless, with only distant stars flickering like tiny, forgotten lights. The human ship Odyssey floated silently through the sector, its hull reflecting the faint glow of a dying star nearby. Captain Elias Kane stared at the navigation panel, feeling a strange tension knotting his stomach. For weeks, their mission had been routine, mapping uncharted planets, scanning for abandoned structures, but tonight, something unusual appeared on the sensors. A faint, rhythmic signal, barely perceptible, pulsed from a small, rocky world on the outer edge of the system. The pattern wasn't natural, it carried a strange weight, a sense of urgency that made Kane's pulse quicken. He leaned closer to the console, his fingers hovering over the controls, knowing deep inside that some part of him had been waiting for this. The crew gathered quietly, their eyes wide as the signal repeated. Technician Mira Vallon, the youngest member aboard, broke the silence. "Captain, this signal isn't random. It's like someone, or something, is trying to speak." Her voice was small, but the words carried a ripple of tension through the control room. Kane didn't answer immediately. He already knew that following this signal could lead them into unknown danger. But something about its pattern, almost like a plea, pulled at him. "Set a course for the planet," he said finally, his voice firm but calm. "Slow approach. Keep sensors wide open. I don't want surprises." As the ship descended through the thin atmosphere, the world revealed itself, a barren, rocky landscape, dotted with jagged cliffs and the remains of structures that once looked alien, now broken and weathered by time. There was no sign of life, only the faint hum of the signal coming from deeper inside the largest structure. Kane's ship touched down near the entrance, and the airlock hissed open. The crew stepped carefully onto the dusty surface, their boots stirring up pale gray dust that floated in the low gravity. The building was massive, like a cathedral of another world, with walls covered in strange markings that seemed almost alive. The signal grew louder here, a soft pulse that resonated in their chests, tugging at something they could not explain. Inside, shadows danced as the crew moved cautiously. Every corner seemed empty, every hallway silent except for the echo of their own footsteps. And then Kane saw her. She sat in the center of a circular room, small and frail, her greenish-blue skin shimmering faintly under the dim lights. Her large eyes were downcast, filled with a sadness so deep it felt almost tangible. The alien girl didn't move as they approached, as if she had been waiting for centuries in that lonely place. Mira whispered, She's alive. But why is she here, alone?" Kane knelt slowly, careful not to startle her, and extended a hand. She flinched but did not run. There was a trembling, almost invisible shiver in her tiny frame, and yet an unspoken intelligence burned in her eyes, bright and piercing. The room suddenly seemed to breathe with tension. The signal wasn't just a random call for help, it was a warning. Kane felt it in his bones. There was something powerful about her, something hidden beneath the sadness, something that made the hair on the back of his neck stand on end. He glanced at his crew. They were tense too, sensing the same strange energy radiating from the girl. The silence stretched, thick and almost suffocating, until finally, she lifted her head slightly and let out a sound, a soft, melodic note that seemed to echo through the walls, almost like a song of sorrow. It carried an emotion that no human words could capture, a depth that made Kane's heart ache with empathy and fear all at once. Kane motioned for his crew to stand back. "We're not here to hurt you," he said softly, keeping his voice calm. "We want to help." The girl tilted her head slowly, studying him with a wary gaze. And then, as if deciding something in a fraction of a heartbeat, she stood. Her movements were cautious but precise, almost graceful, and she walked a few steps toward Kane before stopping again. She didn't speak, but the room seemed to hum in response to her presence. Kane felt an instinctive connection forming, fragile yet undeniable. Before anyone could react further, the building shook slightly, a low rumble vibrating through the floor. Dust fell from the ceiling, and a strange vibration ran through the walls. The signal, their guide, their warning, suddenly grew erratic, as if something outside had noticed their presence. Kane's eyes darted to the windows. Shadows moved on the horizon, shapes that were large, swift, and purposeful. The feeling of unease intensified. Whoever, or whatever, had left this girl behind was still nearby, watching. The tension in the air thickened, almost pressing against them. Kane knew, without question, that this mission had become more dangerous in an instant. But amidst the fear, Kane felt a quiet resolve forming. He would not leave her here, not when it was clear she had no one else. He looked at her again, and though her eyes still carried that deep, sorrowful sadness, there was a glimmer of trust, fragile but enough. "We're taking you with us," Kane said firmly, and for a moment, the room seemed to still entirely, as if holding its breath. She hesitated, then slowly nodded. The signal's pulse softened slightly, almost like a sigh of relief. As the crew prepared to leave, Kane couldn't shake the sense that this small, sad girl held something much larger than herself. Something that could change everything. And somewhere in the dark reaches of space, hidden eyes were watching, waiting for the right moment to strike. The Odyssey lifted off, dust and stones swirling beneath its engines, carrying with it a girl who seemed fragile, lost, and yet, somehow, destined for something extraordinary. The galaxy was about to witness a miracle born from the saddest heart, and no one could predict what would come next. The Odyssey glided silently through space, its engines humming softly as stars streaked past in faint trails. Captain Kane sat in the command chair, eyes fixed on the alien girl. She remained still in the corner of the cabin, her knees drawn up to her chest, her large, sorrowful eyes following every movement of the crew. There was a quiet tension in the air, one that made the ship feel smaller than it really was, as though the walls themselves were holding their breath. Kane couldn't shake the feeling that she was not just sad, she was carrying something far heavier than loneliness. Something ancient, something dangerous, something the galaxy itself would notice if unleashed. Mira approached slowly, kneeling beside the girl with her hands held open in a gesture of peace. "I'm Mira," she said gently. "We're your friends. You don't need to be afraid." The girl's eyes flickered at the sound of her voice, a subtle change, almost like a small spark in the darkness. She tilted her head slightly, watching Mira with curiosity and caution. Then, almost imperceptibly, she reached a hand toward Mira's, but pulled back at the last second. Kane observed, sensing that this gesture was a bridge forming, a bridge that could connect two species across the vastness of space. But he also understood that it could collapse in an instant. Hours passed aboard the ship, the crew attempting to communicate with her in every way they could. Words, gestures, drawings, nothing seemed to work. And yet, small things began to happen. Lights flickered when she moved, subtle and brief. Instruments showed brief anomalies, readings that didn't match any natural phenomena. Kane realized that the girl was not just a passive observer, she was interacting with the ship in ways they could barely understand. Every time she blinked, every time she moved, something small and strange rippled through the technology around her. Mira whispered to Kane, her voice low and awed. She's not like any life form we've ever known. She's touching the ship." Kane's jaw tightened. This wasn't just a rescue mission anymore. Something far bigger was unfolding. As night fell in the distant sectors of space, the ship's communication panel crackled to life with an encrypted signal. Kane immediately recognized it as a tracking attempt from an unknown source. The girl's head lifted sharply at the sound, her eyes widening as though she recognized the threat instantly. The crew tensed, weapons ready, but Kane held up a hand. "Wait," he said. "She knows what's coming." And she did. A moment later, a wave of energy pulsed from her small frame, subtle but undeniable. The ship's shields flickered, then stabilized at a higher efficiency than before. The crew stared in stunned silence, realizing that she had done this instinctively, without understanding the scale of her own power. The sadness in her eyes remained, but now it carried a strange strength, a quiet defiance that none of them could have anticipated. The next day, Kane decided to try a different approach. He sat beside her in the observation room, showing her images of humans and alien worlds, simple drawings of families, of friends, of communities. At first, she remained motionless, her gaze empty. But gradually, she began to mimic the gestures, lifting her small hands to match the drawings, tilting her head in a pattern that almost resembled understanding. Kane felt a connection forming, delicate but undeniable, like a thread woven between hearts across light years of isolation. It was a silent agreement. She trusted them enough to start revealing herself. But even in this fragile trust, an undercurrent of fear lingered. Kane knew that if her abilities were discovered too soon by others in the galaxy, no human ship would be able to protect her. Tension mounted when the ship's sensors detected multiple vessels approaching at high speed. Kane's stomach dropped. These were not neutral ships, not explorers. They moved with precision, like hunters tracking prey. The girl's eyes widened, and she clutched her knees, whispering a soundless note that resonated deep inside the hull. Kane felt the ship itself respond, as if it acknowledged the girl's fear and prepared to defend her. His crew readied themselves, but Kane could see in their faces the same mix of awe and terror he felt. She was small, fragile, human in shape yet not human in essence, and yet she carried a force none of them fully understood. As the enemy ships drew closer, the girl rose slowly, moving to the center of the cabin. Her small body glowed faintly under the dim light of the observation panels. Kane noticed the pulse of the signal she had sent from the shelter now emanating from her directly. The energy was subtle at first, a shimmer that made the air feel heavier, thicker, charged with anticipation. And then it strengthened, vibrating through the ship, touching the instruments, the hull, even the hearts of the crew. Kane realized that she was not only responding to the approaching danger, she was preparing to act, instinctively, using the hidden power that had been dormant for far too long. In that moment, Kane understood the truth. They had not merely rescued a lonely alien girl. They had adopted a being whose existence was a puzzle, whose sadness masked an incredible potential, and whose presence would change everything. The galaxy, in its vast and silent expanse, had not yet realized the storm that was coming. And as the Odyssey turned to face the enemy ships, Kane felt a chill of both fear and hope. This small, sorrowful creature, fragile as she seemed, held the key to a miracle that no one, not even the humans aboard, could fully predict. The girl's eyes met Kane's again, a silent promise of something greater, something unexpected. The bond had begun, fragile but undeniable, and with it came the knowledge that survival depended not only on skill and firepower, but on understanding the unknown. And as the first shots of the pursuing ships lit up the dark vacuum outside, Kane knew that the journey was only beginning, and that the true challenge was yet to come. The vast emptiness of space was suddenly broken by flashes of light and the low hum of approaching ships. The sensors aboard the Odyssey blared warnings, red lights flickering across the control panels. Captain Kane stood rigid, his jaw tight, his eyes scanning the readings. The enemy vessels were unlike anything he had seen before, sleek, angular, and fast, moving in perfect coordination as if they shared a single mind. Each ship radiated a quiet menace, a promise of destruction waiting in the shadows of the void. Kane could feel the weight of the situation pressing down on him. This was no ordinary encounter. Whoever had left the girl behind had enemies, and now those enemies had found them. The alien girl, small and fragile, moved to the center of the cabin, her eyes glowing faintly with an eerie light. The crew instinctively stepped back, unsure of what she was about to do. Kane took a deep breath, trying to steady himself, but even he felt the pull of something immense radiating from her. The girl's small hands raised slightly, and the pulsing energy that had only whispered through the ship before now surged stronger, moving through the walls and instruments like a living force. The pursuing ships hesitated, their formations faltering for a brief, critical moment. Kane realized that she was not just scared, she was defending them, instinctively and powerfully, without fully understanding her own strength. The first warning shot hit the Odyssey seconds later, sending a shudder through the hull. Sparks flew from the damaged console, and the crew scrambled to stabilize the systems. Mira grabbed Kane's arm, her face pale but determined. "She's doing this, she's protecting us," she said, her voice trembling. Kane nodded, his mind racing. The girl's powers were extraordinary, but they were also unpredictable. One wrong move, and the ship could be torn apart, or worse, they could provoke the enemy into something far worse. Every second stretched, thick with tension, as the pursuing ships closed in, ready to strike again. Kane knew they had only one chance. He turned to his crew. "We can't outrun them. We have to make her work with us, guide her. She knows things we don't, and now we need her to trust us completely." The girl's eyes flickered at his words, and for a moment, she seemed to hesitate. But then, a soft hum filled the cabin, vibrating in every bone, every nerve, as though the ship itself acknowledged her presence. The enemy ships fired again, but this time, the shots faltered mid-space, disrupted by a force that no human technology could explain. Kane's heart pounded in disbelief. The girl was shaping reality around them, bending the battlefield in ways they could barely comprehend. Suddenly, a surge of motion rippled across the Odyssey. The girl floated slightly above the deck, her small frame suspended as the energy around her intensified. Lights flickered, instruments went wild, and the crew held onto anything solid, afraid of what might happen next. Kane's mind raced. How could a being so small, so fragile, wield such power? But he also knew that her sadness, her years of isolation, had not made her weak. It had made her resilient, sharp, and now, undeniably dangerous. The enemy ships hesitated again, their formations disrupted by the invisible force radiating from her. Kane seized the moment. "Prepare the shields. Divert power to the engines. We move on my mark." The alien girl's eyes locked with Kane's, and a silent understanding passed between them. She had always been alone, abandoned by her own kind, but now she was part of something larger. She pulsed once, sharply, and the Odyssey responded, moving with unnatural speed, almost as if the girl's will guided it through space. The pursuing vessels fired relentlessly, but each shot seemed to falter, slowed, or deflected by the girl's unseen influence. Kane gritted his teeth, feeling a mix of fear and awe. He had seen courage before, heroism, even desperation, but this was different. This was raw, untamed power wrapped in innocence and sorrow. As the battle continued, Kane realized that the true threat was not just the ships, they were secondary. The real danger was what would happen if the girl lost control, if fear overtook her instincts. And yet, despite the overwhelming odds, she moved with purpose, her energy shaping a shield, a path, a lifeline for them all. Mira whispered to Kane, her voice barely audible over the alarm sounds. "She's guiding us. She's showing us the way." Kane's eyes widened. He understood now that survival depended not only on their human skill and technology, but on forming a bond with her, trusting the unknown, and believing in a miracle born from the most unlikely source. The enemy ships closed in one final time, firing volleys meant to break the Odyssey's hull. But the girl's energy flared like a star igniting, and the blasts shattered harmlessly, diverted by the invisible force surrounding the ship. A moment of silence followed, broken only by the hum of the ship's systems stabilizing. Kane looked at her, and she finally spoke, not in words, but in a soft melodic note, a sound that resonated deep within the crew's chests. It was both a warning and a promise, a signal that the girl had embraced her role, however unwillingly, as protector, guide, and perhaps the galaxy's unexpected weapon. Kane exhaled slowly, leaning back in his chair. He realized that the journey they had embarked on was no longer a simple rescue mission. It was a struggle for survival, for understanding, and for the chance to witness something extraordinary. The girl's sadness remained, a shadow over her small frame, but beneath it now lay courage, power, and a quiet defiance that could change the course of everything. The enemy ships retreated for now, their sleek shapes disappearing into the dark void, but Kane knew this was only the beginning. As the Odyssey sailed on, carrying its fragile but powerful passenger, Kane's mind raced with questions. Who had abandoned her? What forces were still hunting her? And most importantly, what miracle would she bring to the universe, and to humanity, when the time came? The tension aboard the ship did not fade. It thickened, hung in every breath, every glance, every heartbeat. And in the quiet moments between alarms and whispers, Kane knew one undeniable truth. The galaxy had not yet seen the full extent of the storm that traveled with them in the form of the saddest alien girl ever rescued by humans. The Odyssey moved like a shadow through the cold void, engines humming low as the distant stars passed silently by. The enemy ships had retreated, but their presence lingered like a threat in the air, a constant reminder that safety was temporary. Captain Kane stood at the observation deck, staring out at the empty darkness, yet he felt eyes on them, unseen watchers somewhere in the void. The alien girl remained seated in the corner, her small hands clutching the edge of the bench as if drawing strength from it. Though she looked fragile, Kane could feel the energy pulsing quietly from her, a soft hum beneath the surface, ready to surge at any moment. As the ship approached a narrow asteroid field, alarms suddenly screamed. Sensors lit up, showing enemy ships returning, faster and more numerous this time. Kane barked orders, his voice steady but urgent. Divert power to engines and shields. Brace for impact and evasive maneuvers. The crew rushed to follow, hands flying across consoles as the ship lurched forward. The girl rose without a word, floating slightly above the deck, her small body glowing faintly. The ship seemed to respond to her movements, banking and dodging with precision that defied normal piloting. Kane realized that she wasn't just reacting to danger, she was guiding the Odyssey, instinctively and without hesitation. Asteroids whizzed past like deadly missiles, but the girl's influence shaped a path through the chaos. Kane could see the enemy ships struggling to follow, their formations breaking apart as if they were suddenly clumsy and slow. Mira whispered, awestruck. She's controlling more than just the ship, she's predicting everything. Kane didn't speak. He could feel the truth of her words. The girl's power was vast and unpredictable, but it was also precise, almost intelligent, like a silent guardian inside the ship. Every twist, every turn, every pulse of energy kept them alive, but Kane knew it wouldn't be enough forever. The enemy's persistence was relentless, and their firepower was far superior. Suddenly, one of the alien vessels fired a concentrated beam aimed directly at the Odyssey's engine core. Sparks and alarms erupted, and the ship shuddered violently. Kane's hands flew over the controls, trying to stabilize the engines, but the beam was relentless. Then the girl stepped forward, her small hands raised, and the energy she emitted surged outward. The beam fractured and disintegrated mid-space, scattered harmlessly into the void. Kane felt a mix of fear and awe. She had saved them again, instinctively, without fully understanding the force she wielded. The crew exchanged stunned glances, realizing that survival now depended on more than human skill. As they cleared the asteroid field, Kane noticed that the girl was trembling slightly, exhaustion flickering across her small frame. Her eyes, still glowing faintly, darted around the cabin, sensing things they could not see. Kane knelt beside her, speaking softly. "You're doing amazing, but you don't have to do this alone." She turned to him, her eyes wide, filled with a mix of fear, sadness, and something else, trust. For the first time, Kane felt a connection that went deeper than words, a silent understanding between human and alien that bridged the vast emptiness of space. But peace was fleeting. The enemy ships were still in pursuit, and the sensors now showed a massive formation moving at speeds that should have been impossible. Kane realized that their escape route was no longer safe. "Prepare for hyperjump," he commanded, his voice firm. The crew moved quickly, working in unison, but tension hung like a heavy cloud over the bridge. The girl floated to the center of the cabin once more, her energy pulsing stronger than before, as if sensing the danger and preparing to act. Kane glanced at her, silently asking if she could do it. She nodded slightly, almost imperceptibly, and the Odyssey began to vibrate as the ship aligned for the jump. As they entered hyperspace, the stars stretched into long streaks, and the ship shuddered under the strain of the faster-than-light travel. The alien girl's energy flared, stabilizing the engines, guiding the vessel through the cosmic turbulence. Kane felt a mix of relief and amazement. They had escaped, for now, but the threat was not gone. Somewhere out there, a force was tracking them, relentless and patient, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. And the girl, small and fragile though she appeared, was their only shield against what was coming. Hours later, in the calm that followed hyperspace, Kane walked to the observation deck, staring at the stars beyond. The girl sat quietly nearby, her glowing eyes dimmed slightly in exhaustion. Kane whispered, more to himself than anyone else, "You're stronger than you know, and we need that strength. The galaxy isn't ready for what's coming." Mira joined him, placing a gentle hand on his shoulder. "Do you think she understands what she's capable of?" Kane shook his head slowly. "Not fully. But she's learning. And so are we. We have to protect her. No matter what." Outside, the stars stretched endlessly, cold and distant. Inside the Odyssey, a small figure rested, the pulse of her energy soft but steady, like a heartbeat in the dark. Kane knew this was just the beginning. The girl had survived the past, survived abandonment and loneliness. Now she was alive in the heart of a human ship, carrying a power that could turn the tide of any battle, any challenge, any war. And as the Odyssey moved toward uncharted sectors of space, Kane felt a mixture of dread and hope. The next threat was coming, and the girl, despite her sadness and fear, would face it with them. The quiet hum of the ship filled the room, but the tension remained, lingering in every corner. Kane knew that the escape was only temporary. Somewhere in the galaxy, enemies were preparing, watching, and waiting. And yet, for the first time, he felt a sliver of confidence. They had the girl. They had her power. And together they could survive, and maybe, just maybe, create something extraordinary from the most unlikely beginning. The Odyssey drifted through the quiet void of space, its engines whispering against the darkness. For a brief moment, the tension aboard the ship eased, the crew catching their breath after the relentless pursuit. But Captain Kane knew it was only a pause, not safety. Somewhere out there, in the cold emptiness, enemies were regrouping, planning, calculating. And yet, there was a sense of fragile hope now, one that had taken root in the most unlikely way. In the alien girl, small and fragile, whose sadness hid a force powerful enough to shift the balance of life and death across the galaxy. The girl sat near the observation deck, her large eyes tracing the stars as if she could see beyond them, into places no human had ever imagined. Kane approached cautiously, unsure how to begin. He had tried to communicate with her for days, with words, gestures, and images, but none had conveyed the depth of meaning he sought. And now he realized the truth. She might not speak in any language humans knew, yet she had already communicated far more than words could express. Mira followed, carrying a small pad with data and diagrams, hoping for a breakthrough in understanding. The girl's eyes flickered at the sight of the pad, and for the first time, she reached out, touching the surface with her tiny fingers. Lines of light ran across the pad in response, symbols forming in a language no one aboard recognized. Kane felt a chill of awe and fear. She had awakened something that humans were not ready to comprehend. Suddenly, the room shifted, or perhaps it was the girl herself. Energy pulsed through her like a heartbeat, soft at first, then stronger, vibrating against the walls of the Odyssey. Kane instinctively stepped back, and Mira grabbed his arm. The symbols on the pad glowed brighter, arranging themselves into patterns that almost seemed to narrate a story. The girl tilted her head, her eyes locking with Kane's, and he realized, with a mixture of disbelief and wonder, that she was showing him a vision. Not words, not sounds, but images that floated in his mind like vivid memories. He saw distant worlds, ruined civilizations, and alien cities filled with beings who had feared her, misunderstood her, abandoned her. And then he saw her power, raw and brilliant, shaping reality itself, a force so immense that even the enemies who had pursued them might not survive it. Kane staggered back, gripping the rail. What are you?" he whispered. The girl made a sound, a soft melodic note, almost like a sigh, and Kane felt the answer resonate deep within him. She was not merely an alien. She was a being born of purpose and sorrow, a creature shaped by abandonment and resilience. Her powers were a defense, a survival mechanism, and possibly a key to forces humanity had never encountered. The realization weighed on him. She was a miracle and a danger all at once. And yet, despite her power, her sadness had never left her. It lingered, subtle but heavy, a reminder that even the strongest beings carry the weight of isolation. Mira whispered, "She's showing us everything she's been through. Her life, her exile, her strength." Kane nodded slowly. The girl raised a hand, and the energy pulsing from her extended into the cabin. Kane felt it sweep over him like a tide, connecting him to her memories, her fears, and her hope. He understood, then, that her power was not just physical or technological. It was emotional, linked to her heart and mind in ways humans could barely grasp. Every pulse of energy carried her story, her pain, her longing for connection. Kane realized why she had been abandoned, why she had been left alone in that shelter. She was different, more than anyone could control, more than anyone could understand. And now she had chosen to trust them. The Odyssey's sensors beeped, signaling approaching ships once again, but Kane found his attention torn between the external threat and the revelation unfolding before him. The girl's energy surged, not violently, but purposefully, stabilizing the ship, repairing minor damages left by the previous encounters. Kane saw in that act not only instinct but intention, a quiet will to survive, protect, and guide. She was no longer a passenger, she was a partner, the secret key to their survival. And as the crew watched, awestruck, Kane understood something else. The galaxy had underestimated her. Any faction that believed her weakness would be their advantage would soon learn their mistake. The girl's gaze shifted, and for the first time, she made a sound resembling a word. It was soft, almost a whisper, and Kane didn't understand it, but the meaning was clear. She was warning them, preparing them, and perhaps asking for trust. Kane knelt before her, his voice steady. "We will protect you. We will keep you safe. You are not alone anymore." She tilted her head, her eyes reflecting a glimmer of hope, the first real spark of it since he had found her. Kane felt a strange warmth, an unspoken promise that whatever came next, they would face it together. Outside, the dark reaches of space remained silent and cold, indifferent to the drama unfolding inside the small ship. But inside the Odyssey, a new force had awakened. The alien girl, abandoned and sorrowful, had revealed her truth, a power vast and untamed, yet guided by heart and purpose. Kane knew the real challenge was still ahead. Enemies would not rest, and the galaxy would soon learn of the miracle traveling with them. But for the first time, he also knew that they had something more valuable than shields or weapons. They had hope. They had trust. And they had the girl, whose sadness had turned into strength, whose fragility hid an unimaginable force. As the Odyssey sailed toward uncharted space, Kane's mind raced with possibilities. What worlds would they face next? What dangers would test this fragile alliance? And most importantly, what would the girl do when she realized the full extent of her power? One truth remained undeniable. The universe had never seen a miracle like her, and humanity had never known a companion like this. The revelation was only the beginning, and the journey ahead promised danger, wonder, and the chance to witness something extraordinary that no one could have predicted. The Odyssey drifted through the silent darkness of space, the calm before a storm that no one aboard could yet see. Captain Kane stood at the command deck, eyes fixed on the view ahead. The enemy ships were closing in once again, faster, larger, and more numerous than before. This time, there would be no escape without a fight. The alien girl, small and fragile as she appeared, had been quiet for hours, her glowing eyes fixed on the stars outside. Kane could feel the pulse of her power beneath the surface, subtle at first, then growing stronger, almost as if she were listening to the heartbeat of the universe itself. The first warning shots hit the Odyssey, and alarms screamed across the ship. Crew members scrambled, hands flying across consoles, but Kane knew that no human effort alone could survive what was coming. He glanced at the girl. She floated to the center of the cabin, her hands raised slightly, and energy began to radiate from her in waves. The glow intensified, pulsing like a living thing, and the hull of the ship seemed to hum in response. Kane realized, with a mixture of fear and awe, that she was preparing to act. The galaxy had underestimated her, and the enemy was about to discover the full force of what they had tried to destroy. The alien ships fired again, concentrated beams slicing through the void, yet each shot shattered or twisted in the invisible field around the Odyssey. The girl's energy flowed outward, not chaotic but precise, almost intelligent, guiding each attack harmlessly aside. Kane watched, barely able to breathe, as the ship moved with uncanny precision, dodging impossible odds. Mira whispered beside him, voice trembling with awe. She's controlling everything." Kane nodded slowly. "Not just the ship, she's controlling the battlefield itself." The crew stared, their fear mingling with wonder. The girl, abandoned and lonely, was now the guardian of humanity's survival in a vast and merciless galaxy. The enemy ships regrouped for one final attack, concentrating fire on the Odyssey's hull. Kane gritted his teeth. There was no room for error. He looked at the girl, silently asking for trust, for control, for a miracle. She raised her small hands, and the energy around her surged to brilliance. Light bent and twisted, forming shapes that defied physics, waves of power radiating outward like ripples in a pond. The enemy vessels fired, but the blasts disintegrated before they could reach the ship. Kane realized that the girl's ability had evolved. She wasn't merely defending, she was shaping reality itself, bending space and energy with instinctive precision. Then it happened. The alien girl emitted a wave of light so bright, so immense, that it filled the cabin, washing over every crew member. Kane felt it in his chest, in his bones, a force that was both terrifying and beautiful. The enemy ships were caught in the wave, twisted and scattered into the void like flotsam in a storm. Kane's crew held on for their lives, feeling the surge of power as it reshaped the battlefield. And through it all, the girl remained calm, focused, her eyes reflecting both sadness and the quiet strength of someone who had survived countless losses. When the light finally faded, the enemy ships were gone, scattered across the void, no longer a threat. The Odyssey floated silently, its systems intact, its crew shaken but alive. Kane sank into his chair, exhaling slowly, unable to fully comprehend what had just happened. The girl hovered nearby, her glow soft now, her energy settled into a steady hum. She looked at Kane, and in her eyes he saw something new: trust, hope, and a glimmer of joy. The sadness that had once defined her was still there, but it had been transformed, tempered by connection, courage, and the miracle of being truly seen and accepted. Mira approached, tears in her eyes. She saved us all," she whispered. Kane nodded, voice quiet. "No, she didn't just save us. She changed everything. She showed us what hope looks like, what strength looks like, even in the most fragile form." The alien girl tilted her head, almost shyly, and Kane realized something profound. Humanity had never adopted a being like her before, and she had never experienced a family, a home, a place to belong. The miracle was not just her power. It was the bond they had formed, the trust, the understanding, the choice to protect and cherish someone who had been abandoned. Outside, stars stretched endlessly, cold and indifferent. But inside the Odyssey, warmth and light had taken root. Kane knew that the galaxy would soon notice them, would soon understand that this small, sorrowful girl was no ordinary life form. She had survived exile, abandonment, and loneliness, and she had emerged as a force that could defy armies, defy logic, and inspire hope. The crew gathered around her, careful but reverent, and Kane understood that the real journey was only beginning. The miracle they had witnessed was not just in battle. It was in the discovery of connection, of trust, and of the extraordinary hidden in the most unexpected places. As the Odyssey continued through uncharted space, Kane glanced at the alien girl one last time. Her small hand reached out, not in fear, but in quiet understanding. She had been the saddest being in the universe, abandoned and alone. And now, she had become the reason for hope, the center of a miracle that would echo across the stars. The galaxy had yet to see the full extent of her power, and humanity had never known a companion like her. Together, they sailed forward, into darkness, into wonder, and into a future shaped by courage, trust, and the most unlikely miracle the universe had ever witnessed.